All right, everybody, welcome aboard to the Friday episode of Locked On Avalanche, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Chris Maselli, along with Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan. A crossover Friday for you guys. We are going to be joined momentarily here by Dane Lewis from Locked On Stars. We probably want to get some crossovers within a division done within the next few weeks before the season starts. So why not start? Doesn't matter where we start, but Dallas is always a good place to start. I hate when the Avalanche go there. So we'll meet up with Dane in a moment. But first, we are going to talk that Nathan MacKinnon has talked about his pending contract. I don't know about you, man. It took some weight off my shoulders. Let's get to it.
You're Locked On Avalanche, your daily podcast on the Colorado Avalanche. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, I think we all knew it was gonna, he was not going anywhere, and we were hoping that it would get done, even if it didn't get done this offseason. I think we'd still have confidence that it would get done next offseason, but I've been watching sports long enough to know take nothing for granted. So, but what Nathan MacKinnon said the other day kind of honestly put me at ease. So we will talk about that in a minute. But first things first, thank you for making this your first listen of the day. That's always appreciated. Follow us on our social media outlets, LOPN_Avalanche. Twitter, Locked On Avalanche. On Instagram, questions, comments, concerns, opinions, lockedonavalanche@gmail.com. And follow us on our YouTube channel over on YouTube. Hit subscribe, get notified when a new show goes live. All right, Mr. Shaggy. In Vegas, there is the NHL Players Media Tour, and Nathan MacKinnon is there. And he spoke, and he did not really mix words. He was just asked, what's the status with the contract and the extension? And he said flat out, he's anticipating it getting done, quote unquote, soon. And soon meant before opening night. So there was another quote somewhere about, I didn't hear him actually say it's going to be big. They asked, I know Elliot Friedman asked him, he kind of prefaced asking him the question by saying, it's out there that you might be in the realm of Connor McDavid money. And he brushed that off and just kind of said, like, well, let my agent handle that, but kind of like snickered when he said it. But who is it? Jonathan Matt, I think it's Matisse. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing
sure.
His name. Yeah. He put in quotes that it's not going to be in a single digit. I don't know who said that. It might have been his agent who said that. And I think we're all assuming that it's not going to be in the single digits. I guess forget the number. Are you just relieved at what McKinnon said and that we should be looking forward to him in Avalanche colors for beyond this year, which he's under contract for, obviously?
I mean, it's Nathan MacKinnon. If it's not us, then everybody, all 31 other teams are going to be backing up the Brinks truck, making a new dollar bill, put somebody else's face on it just to pay him. Like,
yeah,
whatever the number is, it's like, if you're a huge Nathan MacKinnon fan, or if you're just a Nathan MacKinnon appreciator, there's not a lot of Nathan MacKinnon haters out there. So wherever you fall, whatever the number is going to be, whether it's single digit, double digit, there's not going to be anything to really pick it apart because he's going to be a member of the Avalanche and it's going to be a core piece that the Avalanche will have for years to come. So, I mean, what can you say negatively about it? Like, he deserves it. He's earned it. We have a shiny cup. Like, mission accomplished.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, if his heart was really like Johnny Hockey wanting to go back East Coast and stuff, you know what I mean? Like, if his heart was really to go more towards home, which would be East Coast, he might say, no, I'm not signing anything. I won my cup here. I did my, I crossed everything off. my time in Colorado, and now it's time to go back home. He didn't say that. He said, I want to spend my entire career in Colorado. Like just at this press conference, he said it. So and again, it's all stuff that we kind of figured and assumed, but to hear him say it out loud when asked directly, it does. It just makes you feel good that one of the best players in the league likes it here and wants to stay here for the foreseeable future. And on the 32 Thoughts podcast, I put this up on Twitter. Friedman asked him, so the path of a deal getting done is there, and there's nothing. He literally said there's nothing to worry about, and McKinnon answered, yeah, totally. I was driving in my truck when I was listening to that, and I just settled into my seat a little bit more when that happened. Like, oh yeah, all right, now we're just cruising on the highway right now because this is a good car ride home. I'm telling you, man. It just took again.
You went from Megadeth to Mumford & Sons. You just put it in cruise control.
Yeah, Ani DeFranco. I went to after that. Yeah, I did, man. It's like I said. I was like 99% confident that he was going to sign, but I've seen that 1% kill me in the past of a player that you grow to love and want to stick around, and they don't. So feels good.
And we talk about this team like they're always in the shadow of the 96 2001 team. Sounds like Nathan MacKinnon's about to be our new Joe Sakic, like start his career and end his career right here. So
be awesome. So when it does break, whenever it happens, we'll definitely be talking about that because it's going to have some implications on the Avs no matter what. And it will be interesting to see what that number is, because he knows if he goes too high, he's gonna hurt this team. He could potentially hurt this team in the short term, maybe not in the long term, because the cap is going to go up in another year, maybe two. But that's a lot of stuff to talk about whenever that deal gets signed, and we will definitely talk about that. What we are going to do right now is join up with Dane from Locked On Stars. You're looking around for something. I don't know what you're looking around.
I'm looking for Dane.
Oh, yeah. We're going to join him. But first, we got to hear from BetOnline. And betonline.net is your number one source for all of your pro and college football betting needs and sports info for this season, of course, with the NFL season underway. Big gambling sport. So head on over to BetOnline to get all of your gambling needs and news right over at BetOnline. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, golf, of course, hockey, and of course, football. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. That's betonline.net, where the game starts. All right. It's me. It's Shaggy. It's Dane. Let's hit a crossover.
Dane!
Welcome in, everybody, to this crossover edition Central Division preview for the Dallas Stars and the Colorado Avalanche. This is Dane Lewis, host of Locked On Dallas Stars, joined now by both hosts of Locked On Colorado Avalanche, Chris Masili and Kyle Sullivan. And fellas, hockey season is upon us. It's that time of year where preseason's about to get started. Training camp is right around the corner. How are you guys feeling with you guys covering not just any NHL team, but the defending Stanley Cup champions?
Yeah, it's a feeling we haven't had in a while. So it's I don't know. It's a different team, believe it or not. The big names are still there, clearly. But so that's good. But your depth guys some of it has changed, not all of it, but some of it. And the question is the sum of that, is that good enough as last year? I think that remains to be seen. And the big question marks right now are, I think after signing Rodriguez, it doesn't like slam the door on like, okay, like we got Nazem Kadri's replacement. It helps. But I think now the focus, where it was, you could say like, that's the 2C and goaltending. I think it's all goaltending now for the Avs. I think that is all right, let's cross our arms and see what we have. And other than that, I mean, I think they've done a really good job keeping the team mainly intact. So yeah, you feel pretty good.
Yeah, especially like Avalanche fans going into this year when you're seeing all the moves that McFarland and Sakic made, where it kind of looked like we were keeping the band back together, like putting them all back together. Everybody's kind of staying in house. You're not really making those landmark moves. And you kind of are like, well, what are the Avalanche going to do next season to try and defend that cup with this same team? Are they going to run it back? And with losing players like Burakovsky, Kadri, like the list goes on, like the depth players like Chris mentioned, they're not there. And then now signing Rodriguez, there's kind of this excitement with the fan base right now. It's how are the Avs going to put this together now? Like there's kind of like a renewed fire where it was kind of complacency for a little bit. You're like, okay, we won the cup. That's great. We finally climbed the mountain after 21 years. Like, now where do we go? Now this excitement on how we're putting this team together, what the goalies look like, we're looking forward to training camp. Like, this is exciting to be like defending Stanley Cup champions and have something else to prove how we can make this roster work.
Yeah, defending a title always difficult in any sport, but especially in the NHL whenever you lose a bunch of key depth pieces, like you guys said, a lot of the big names are there, McKinnon, Makar, Landeskog, Rantanen, so on and so forth. But you guys touched on the goalie situation. That's something that I'm curious to hear you guys' thoughts on. Obviously, Darcy Kemper has now gone on to the Washington Capitals, which leaves you with one new goalie and seemingly one returning goalie with Pavel Francouz and of course Alexander Georgiev coming in being the replacement, quote unquote replacement for Darcy Kemper. What are your thoughts on the goalie situation for the Avs going into this season? Because obviously Kemper did a good job, all things considered, not the best goalie in the league, but obviously did enough to get the team a cup. So what are you guys' thoughts on this goalie tandem going into this year?
So this is where your hosts of Locked On Avalanche kind of disagree. So for me, I didn't like the move. I thought they gave up too much for him. And I'll actually, before I go into this, I really should preface this by saying I hope I'm completely wrong. I have no problem if this dude is like, and the Rangers are sitting there like, oh, we should have got rid of Shesterkin instead. Like, no, it's clearly not going to happen. But if he is on the level, at least Darcy Kemper, I will be happy with that because what we got out of Darcy Kemper was the Stanley Cup, and he wasn't his best in the postseason. He was really good in the regular season, but the stick in the eye after that, really, he kind of I think that lingered around a lot more than he let on. But as far as Georgiev is concerned, like it is a complete wait and see. It's a total you have to prove to me. And if the Avalanche were in a different position, I might feel like, okay, like, I know we're a team that's on the rise, and if we haven't won a Stanley Cup yet, and they want to go this route, I'd still question it, but I could see it. But for me, for a team that is the defending champion, I want the goalie position shored up a lot more than a question mark. And that's completely what he is. He's got the talent, and he where he was in New York, he wasn't getting the playing time, and I understand why. And maybe that's it. Maybe he just needs to get more playing time. And what they did with Kemper, and a lot of people were like, you could put a sleeping duck in net, and with that defense, you'd win a ton of games. I get that mindset for the Avs. It just doesn't make me comfortable. So I'm rooting for him. He's wearing Avalanche colors. I'm clearly going to root for him. It's just not the route that I would have gone. But Kyle and I always go back to trust in Joe. And, Joe Sakic seems to have the Midas touch with so many things. So I have to give him a benefit of the doubt and put my trust in him. But it's a wait and see for me.
Yeah, and when Georgiev came in, I was excited because I'm a Pavel Francouz fan. If you paid attention to the show, like I'm a huge Francouz fan. So I thought he was going to get the number one spot. Like I thought this was his job. And then when we brought him in, like it was draft night when Sakic said, "Oh no, he's the clear number one here." So then my tune kind of changed. I was kind of excited because I thought, "Oh, that's a great backup. That'll be fine." And then now it looks like it's the other way around. Yes, I was like Chris mentioned about the sitting duck back there, like with that defense in front of them, you don't have to do a lot. Like we made Grubauer look good. We made Darcy Kemper look good. We had Michael Hutchinson win us a game in the bubble. Like it doesn't take a lot with that defense, but the caliber goalie that both Francouz and Georgiev give, like they're not bad. It's not like we're going out there with a no-name goalie. Like these are proven guys that want to be a starter somewhere. And what better place to be a starter than the defending Stanley Cup champion?
Yeah, absolutely. And that I think that's something that people can, overreact to and saying, oh, Colorado doesn't have this big name goalie like a Shesterkin or a Vasilevsky, but the team still, like you said, that defense outstanding. That offense is going to score a ton of goals. So you just need to have a somewhat competent player in that crease, and you're more than likely going to be set up for success night in, night out. So it'll be really interesting to see how that situation unfolds in Colorado. And you guys touched on this earlier as well, a couple minutes ago, with some of the big offseason departures for the Avalanche. Probably the biggest one I would say is of course Nazem Kadri going to the the Calgary Flames, rather. Got my C teams mixed up. Going to the Calgary Flames, and that team certainly building to be a contender in that Pacific Division. How big is a loss like Nazem Kadri? Because he kind of came not necessarily out of nowhere, because people knew who Nazem Kadri was going into this past season, but he just played, above expectations and was such a key piece for that cup run. So how big is a loss like that? And, you talked about Rodriguez joining the team from Pittsburgh. Who is going to kind of have to step up and be that next Nazem Kadri type player for this team?
I'll let Kyle go first on this one because he's the Nazem Kadri fanatic. So I'll let him go.
I cannot tell a lie. Yeah, I'm a huge Nas stan. I was a big fan of his. Like he was my favorite player in the league before he even came to Colorado. So I spent all of his tenure here defending him. And last season, like with everything that went on, like in the Blues series and him changing his game and not being that goon that everybody knows, like taking that hockey IQ approach to his game. Yes, it was easy to fall in love and stand with Nas. Yes, it's almost impossible to ask anybody to replace Nas's role on that roster. And it's not fair to ask even Nas to replace his production from last year because he doesn't put up those kind of numbers. Like those were crazy numbers. And I doubt that he sees that same kind of production in Calgary. Like that's just not what Nas does. So to ask somebody to be Nas that's a tall task. To find somebody to be a 2C, Erod was brought in to possibly be a 2C. You have JT Compher, and then insert center name here. That's what training camp is exciting. That's what made it exciting. And a lot of Avalanche fans are watching for that sole reason. Who steps up from the Colorado Eagles? Who steps up on this roster? Who wants to be the 2C? Right now, penciled in, it might be Erod.
Yeah, I don't think we're naive enough to just sit here and blow smoke because we host an Avalanche show like, oh, we'll be just fine without Nazem Kadri. Like, no, we won't. That is a big, huge loss. And aside from the numbers that he had last year, I think it would have been fun to see what he could have followed up last year with in an Avalanche uniform. Those numbers were just nobody thought they were coming. So it would have been kind of fun to see, could he match that? Could he surpass that? Or does he come back down to kind of Nazem Kadri numbers and, your mid to high 50s, maybe touching 60? That's kind of where he's at. And I think, it surprised me a little bit. If I don't know where the numbers were with the Avalanche, like I haven't heard anything on if they were close. If not, I have to think that they were a little bit close if it went on as long as it did. You were hearing he was going to keep the Avs informed on where everything stood. He kind of felt like he owed that to them. And for it to go on that long kind of told me that the Avs were kind of in the mix for it. And they've done this with so many free agents. Is like they have a number and they do not budge. You have to give Chris McFarland and Joe Sakic credit for that. They know what system they want to play in terms of the numbers and the salary cap, and they're not moving off of it. And a lot of it is because of, some contracts that are on the horizon with obviously Nathan MacKinnon. You have Bo Byram and Alex Newhook who are due contracts next year. So I think they wanted to bring him back and they just couldn't make the money and the term work. And now we have, like I was saying with the question mark with the goalies, yeah, there is a question mark at 2C. You're not with what we have. The Avs didn't go out and replace or get a replacement that could match what Nazem Kadri can do. So what they have are good players that need to take a massive step up. And I think, it is, I think the two guys that could are Rodriguez and Newhook. We've had JT Compher around for long enough to know, I don't think he's that guy. I don't think we're JT Compher is not going to go from scoring 20, 30 points to miraculously 60. That is not going to happen. It's possible with Newhook because he's young enough and he has that talent, maybe a little bit too early. And with Rodriguez, he's kind of a miniature version of Nazem Kadri in that last year was his best year by far. So if you put him on an Avalanche team, can he bump up his numbers a little bit more? I think that's more likely.
Yeah, it really felt like for a minute in the offseason that Kadri might come back. And I know the Stars were in a similar situation with John Klingberg. It had been rumored since like last Thanksgiving that he was eventually probably going to leave Dallas unless he got some sort of, lengthy extension, and free agency comes and he's probably the biggest name defenseman on the market and he doesn't go for a while. But now he eventually does move on to a team like Anaheim. So was such an interesting story to follow throughout the summer, but certainly quite a big hole to try to fill in with a young player or a veteran player. But I mean, the Avs still have those really good pieces, and someone is likely to step up and still provide some nice depth for this Avalanche team. But now we can take a second and flip the script here and open up the floor to you guys to ask any questions about the Dallas Stars that your listeners may want to know, or that you guys may want to know personally.
I want to throw something out there right away, and it's if I know our listeners know that I'm not a fan of the Vegas Golden Knights. So, but it's kind of like that thing. It's like if a player leaves the Golden Knights, do I still hold it against them that he at one point in time wore those colors, or should I just let it go? And now is the case with the coach. I don't know. Like, I think for players it's a little bit different, but for DeBoer, like he has he's got an attitude about him, which it's one of those things where it's like if he's coaching your team, you probably love it, and if he's not, you really despise it. So, having not coached a game yet for Dallas, what was the mindset of the hire? Did they like the hire? Was there other guys involved that they would have preferred? And now that they did settle on DeBoer, is that met with applause by Stars fans?
Uh, there's a lot that goes into that answer. I know on the team side of things, they really liked that hire. I mean, Jim Nill, the front office, obviously, outwardly you're going to express that during his opening press conference, but there was just a very genuine aspect to it that they were excited that he was there. Obviously, Joe Pavelski, being a member of the Stars team, had a huge influence on that hire. And Pavelski, basically told the front office, in meetings, he said, yeah, if you can get him, go get Peter DeBoer, just because there is that relationship. They had a lot of success in San Jose, and Pavelski is still playing at the top of his game. Now on the fan side of things, it was a little bit of a different reaction initially. It was a relatively negative one, not end of the world type attitude, but even for myself, I think it was just kind of, man, this just feels like a very bland and safe hire. There had been a few other names thrown around. Some coaches, like I know Cassidy, who coming from Boston, who now is in Vegas, his name had been thrown around a little bit. And just a few other candidates as well, that some of them had little to no NHL coaching experience. Some of them might have been coming from, a junior club in Canada. But, there was kind of this idea that maybe the Stars, reach on a guy, but, maybe that reach pays off. So it felt kind of bland, safe, maybe just a basic pick at first. But I think people have kind of come around to it, myself included. If you do, your research and your homework and you see what these Peter DeBoer teams are capable of, especially early on in his time with his respective teams, he has the effect of, either going to the Stanley Cup finals or the conference finals with his past three teams in his first season. And of course, you have that Pavelski connection, and you have some really young, talented offensive players that he can utilize. And even defensively, Brent Burns had some of the best years of his career in San Jose under Pete DeBoer, and Miro Heiskanen is starting to enter the prime of his career, and he's now the primary defenseman here in Dallas. So I think as time has gone on, and you kind of just sit back and think about everything logically, that the hire makes sense. And I think that there is reason for optimism this season, that the Stars can go out and compete, and hopefully push for a spot in the playoffs. And then once they're there, make some noise.
Interesting. That both Chris's question and your follow-up kind of lead into what I was about to ask. In the words of the great prophet Dodger from Oliver and Company, why should I worry? Why should I care? What is
voiced by
that?
Come on. All right, I'm not gonna let this go on long enough.
Yeah,
it's Billy Joel.
I keep thinking of the stadium.
Yeah.
But to the why? What is Dallas trying to chase? Are they trying to chase that Cup Finals appearance, or are they trying to put together a team to compete with the Central? Because when you look at the roster moves, and you mentioned earlier Klenberg leaving, what is going on with Dallas? And with the Central is kind of top heavy, and there's a clear separation between the top and the bottom. Where does Dallas fit, and where are they going?
Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe the best question I've been asked in all of these Central Division previews, and one that is making me possibly rethink everything I've thought about this team. And I want to say that they are potentially pursuing both. Obviously, every owner, every coach is going to say, we want to win the Stanley Cup this year. If a coach in Arizona, Montreal, or Chicago says it this year, they're lying to you, but they're going to say that, to open the season. But Dallas, I think that is a genuine belief, just because you have less than last year, but a small handful of players that are out of their prime or in the twilight of their career, whether that is Pavelski. Jamie Benn isn't the player he once was. Tyler Seguin, also not the player he once was, even though there is hope that maybe he can have a little bit of a turnaround now that he's had more time to recover from his seemingly a million surgeries after their time in the bubble a couple years ago. And so the Stars are just in this weird place where they're kind of ushering out this older generation. And still, I think and they have to hold on to Ben and Seguin for a while. I think we have Ben till 2025 and Seguin till 2027. And both of them combined take up about a quarter of the cap space. And so that makes things difficult for the Stars to build, a team for the future. But they're still attempting, because they do have some really nice young pieces in Rope Hintz, Jason Robertson, who is still unsigned. I was hoping through one of these division previews, that I would eventually say, oh, he's still not signed. But then, later that day or that evening, he signs, and I look dumb. But it's worth it because Jason Robertson's back. And it's funny, Kevin Weeks actually tweeted, I have his notifications on, and he tweeted something about the North Stars, not the Dallas Stars, the Minnesota North, but it caught my eye for half a second while we were recording. And I thought I was about to react to Jason Robertson signing mid-podcast, but I digress. The Stars have some nice pieces, and even at the prospect level, Wyatt Johnston, Logan Stankoven, Maverick Bork, some really nice prospect pieces that are expected to be on the NHL roster within the next season or two. So I want to say that it's realistic the Stars can compete in the Central. I don't think they're going to compete for a top spot, maybe a third place finish. I think that's probably the highest they could go within in the division. And then I think they showed last year that they can certainly be a problem in the playoffs. I don't think many people expected 7 games from them in that series against Calgary, but they were one Johnny Gaudreau shot away from potentially being on the opposite end of that scenario and advancing to the next round. And who knows how far they go after that.
That's and I just want to follow up real quick on that, because I'm genuinely curious about Dallas, because hearing the aging contracts and a promising prospect pool, it's very reminiscent of the other green team in the Central, and they had to buy those ugly contracts out and rely on their flashy Krill the Thrill. Is it going to take one of those type of moves for Dallas to take another step, or do you think the Dallas Stars with the sum of its parts is good enough to contend?
See, the problem with buyouts, especially with a Seguin Ben deal, is they can't. One of them, they would have to murder a puppy or something for the Stars to get rid of them. I mean, you just can't. Statistically, you want to do something to either cut down how much you're paying them, or maybe, get rid of him. I mean, as harsh as that sounds, but Jamie Benn's been your captain for so long, and Sagan, alternate captain. I mean, you just like those are just hard guys to get rid of, and I think that's what is holding the team back from going out and making these massive offseason moves. And they go out and get Mason Marchment from Florida. That's a nice addition, but that was really kind of the pinnacle of their offseason acquisitions. Colin Miller from Buffalo, nice piece, but not going to change your team dynamic defensively. So yeah, I think that there's still hope that they can contend. I think we saw even a couple of years ago, call it whatever you want, a fluke or a kind of a lucky streak run in the bubble. But I mean, that team competed through those first 3 rounds of the playoffs, and then even in the Stanley Cup, they just ran out of gas, and that Tampa team seemed to still be hitting its stride then. And even this past year, I think that there were a lot of times where the Stars could have easily rolled over and kind of died off throughout the majority of the regular season, but they kept fighting and they kept pushing on and competing with teams like Nashville and Vegas and even Vancouver, who hung around longer than I thought. So if anything, even if people say, hey, this team's not going to compete, or even if it looks like they might not be able to, the Dallas Stars we've seen over the past few years are at least going to try. They're not going to go down without a fight. And I think that that's, as long as that is true and as long as that leadership is still intact, I think that there's always, the possibility that they can get into the playoffs. And then, you never know what's going to happen in the Stanley Cup playoffs. I mean, you see upsets all the time, not just within the past couple of seasons, but, Columbus taking down Tampa Bay, was that 2018, 2019 in the first round? I mean, you just never know what you're going to see. And so I think that they can get there, especially, in this division. You talk about Minnesota. I see them potentially taking a step back while still probably competing for the playoffs. And I think the Stars can very well, finish maybe top 4, maybe slipping into that 5th spot in the Central.
Okay.
You mentioned Robertson, and I'm sure you've talked about him, ad nauseum on several, almost probably daily for you. I would assume. What is the holdup? Like, is it money? Is it like what's he looking for? Because I'm looking at the Stars cap friendly. It seems like they're in a pretty good spot with projected cap space. Is he looking for more than what they have remaining, which I'm seeing is like 6.3?
Yeah, it's a combination of things. One, Jason Robertson is in 2 seasons has been really good, really 40 goal scorer this past year, and I don't think a lot of it is the Stars' fault. I think if you want to point the finger at someone, you have to point the finger at these other teams signing these really talented young forwards. I actually talked about this the other day with Seth at Locked On Wild. That you look at Tim Stützle in Ottawa, he signs 8x8. Even a day or two ago, or maybe I think it was yesterday, Jordan Kyrou signs an 8-year deal with St. Louis. Tage Thompson signs that massive deal with Buffalo. Like every time one of these young forwards signs this big deal, you have to imagine that Jason Robertson and his camp are like, oh, like we're better, like Jason's better than this player. I think you could argue that Robertson's better than all those players. Maybe Kyrou, I would say maybe they're a little bit even, or anyway, that makes it more difficult for the Stars with that cap space. And so 6.3, like, good money for, your average, talented NHL forward. But I think Jason Robertson has that potential to be an above average, franchise type player. Kirill Kaprizov could also be thrown in that ring of, talented forwards getting paid a lot. Although I don't think Robertson will make $9 million, but if he wants to get, an 8x8 deal, the Stars are going to have to, make some moves. Anton Hudobin might have to be removed from the roster. A guy like Radek Faksa, you might have to look to try to deal a guy like him. You would just have to make some sort of room to add some additional cap space for Jason Robertson. But I think that's, the biggest part of it. There's also been the Stars owner making some comments about not wanting to pay young players, which is also part of it. But I think at the end of the day, you look at all these other talented young NHL forwards signing these massive deals, and Robertson and his agent, his guys saying Jason's better than these guys, so why should he not make as much, if not more, money than them?
So he was probably deliberately not signing, knowing like these other guys are going to get signed, and just banking on them cashing in, and it's worked to his advantage. And he might even be holding off more if there's any more out there, just so they can sign for something higher, and his value just keeps going up every time it happens.
I think he's. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Is it conceivable to bridge him until Ben and Sagan are out of Dallas?
If I were to guess, and this has been my guess for a while now, I bet that that's what they're going to end up doing. because I don't still have any reason to believe, even though we are getting so close to training camp, that he's gonna go somewhere else.
Yeah.
I mean, I know he likes it here in Dallas. He likes playing with Pavelski and Rope Hintz, and he has a really good relationship with the team, and obviously the fans love him. I mean, we haven't had a goal scorer like him since Mike Modano, or even a prime Jamie Benn or Tyler Seguin. So there's really no reason why he would want to leave. And so I think he will eventually get some deal sorted out. It'll likely be some sort of bridge deal. But to be a fly on the wall in those rooms, meetings or phone calls with the Stars and then Jason Robertson's camp, because it happened with Jake Ottinger too. There's a little bit of a holdout for him as well. Eventually that deal gets worked out pretty friendly for both sides, for the team and the player. Jason Robertson, I think, is a little bit more valuable. Ottinger's great. I'm excited he's back. But Robertson, the Stars struggle to score goals. Robertson's a 40-goal scorer in his sophomore season. You got to have that guy on your roster if you want to compete.
I guess, kind of moving forward into the season, you were talking about the Stars, where they could finish and being maybe that doorstep team that, they get some good play from some good players. Maybe they can sneak in and grab that third spot in the division. When you have like a team like Dallas that is kind of on that verge, for me, like I maybe unfairly, like I kind of turn to what's the goalie situation like, because a lot of times that's what catapults you. Like if you're in that last week or last couple weeks of the season and you're fighting for a spot, you look to the goalies to really step up. And in my opinion, what you guys have, like we both have players that, the opposition is going to hate going up against for a long time. Guys like Cale Makar, it's going to suck for other teams going up against guys like him, and Nathan MacKinnon, who should be around for another 10 years or so. But for guys like us needing to go up against Jake Ottinger, I mean, what's his contract is 3 more years. I hope he plays 3 years and gets the hell out of here, because he's like, honestly, like he's that good. And I think like it was always that Vasilevsky was just up here and nobody could touch him. And now you have Shesterkin kind of join him. And if you ask me, I feel like Ottinger's on that level, not on that level, but approaching that level. And there's more guys catching up to Vasilevsky around the league of standout goalies, and he is one of them. So how I was saying earlier in the show, I hate the fact that the Avalanche have these question marks in goal. How does it feel to not have that question mark with someone like Ottinger?
It's definitely a big help, and like a burden off of Stars fans' shoulders going into this season. And we've just been fortunate to have some outstanding goalie play the past handful of seasons. You go back to Ben Bishop back when he was still healthy and doing his thing. Anton Hudobin in that run in 2020 in the bubble, and now Jake Ottinger, who has come out and really asserted himself as a top 10 goalie in this league, and a guy who's going to be looking to move up that list this season, now being the number one guy in Dallas with Bishop now retired. Hudobin coming off injury, but even if he does play, like who knows if he even cracks the roster, because Scott Wedgwood is also around and was actually a really decent backup for this team down the stretch last year, played in some crucial games to give Ottinger some much needed rest, much needed time off. And it's really good to have him back. And he's 23 years old, so he still has the majority of his career ahead of him. And I think that similar to Robertson, like I think he hopefully will want to stay in Dallas for longer. I know you said you want him gone, and I imagine that's the case for the other Central Division teams as well. Because he always is able to rise to the occasion. I mean, I'm drawn back to the last meeting between our teams in Colorado, the Avs and Stars play, and I think they'd played 2 days before on like a Sunday, and then they meet up on a Tuesday night, and it was like, I mean, we just got beat by the Avs at home, so we're probably going to lose to them in their building, and we won that game, the Stars, because of Jake Ottinger. The offense didn't do great, but Ottinger was just lights out. And then, he goes on in that series in Calgary and goes toe to toe with Jacob Markstrom, another one of the best goalies in the league, shutting down guys like Johnny Gaudreau, Kachuk, so on and so forth. I mean, it just unbelievable at age 23, the things he can do. At the same time, incredibly humble, like knowing that even when he has a bad night, like he acknowledges that he's, makes mistakes and that he has things to work on. And he's set up for success. The Pete DeBoer is bringing in almost an entirely new coaching staff outside of the video coach and then the goalie coach, Jeff Reese. So Ottinger is like still maintaining that relationship with him. Ben Bishop is still hanging around the organization, working with Ottinger, throughout the summer, keeping in contact with him. So the pieces are there around him for him to continue to get better and have a good season and hopefully have a good, next 3 years in Dallas, if not longer.
And I got to ask about what's the rumor mill for the Dallas Stars reverse retro? What's it looking like for them? If you've heard anything,
I really haven't seen a lot. I know first time they did reverse retro, it was like bring back the Mooterists. We knew that wasn't going to happen. People are saying it again this time. I don't really know. I personally haven't seen too many leaks, and any of them that I have don't seem legit because they just look like the last reverse retro, which I thought was fine. It's like you're not going to get better than the actual jersey that was inspired from the Dallas Stars team. But we'll see. I mean, green and black is a unique combination to the league, so we'll see what I think Adidas is still making them, or I know that they're eventually done. So we'll see what they can do.
After this year, they're done.
Yeah,
so
this is the last. This is their swan song.
Yeah,
which means clearance jerseys in the future, allegedly.
Yeah,
Ooh, I like your thinking.
So I'm looking at the matchups between these two over the course of the season, and they got 2 games in November, the 21st in Dallas, and then that same week, that's Saturday in Colorado. And then they don't meet up until later in the year. They play March 4th. That's in Dallas, and then towards the end of the year, April Fool's Day in Colorado. So kind of spaced out, too early in the season, too late in the season. I know it's tough to predict this, but what do you think of like a split, or how do you think it's going to go between these two? There's always good games between the Stars and the Avs.
Yeah, they are always good games. I think realistically a split makes sense, and I think if one team is going to take that advantage, and I think both teams at least win one, and then I think a split is certainly in play. But I don't know. I mean, the Avalanche seem primed to potentially win 3 out of the 4, but the Stars also somehow won 2 last season. And I know the first one was both 2 of those were in Dallas, one was in Colorado, and that first one the Avs still hadn't hit their stride yet, and it was still a close competitive game. And that was also the Stars. I think that was like the 3rd or 2nd game in a 7-game win streak. So that was probably the hottest they were all season. And then, the Avs not fully formed yet. But yeah, it's hard to predict, but I'm always excited when the 2 teams get together.
The Avs don't play well in Dallas. They can win games in there, but it's usually like a 1-0 game. That's like one of the places I don't look forward to the Avs going. Not because I don't feel like they can't win. I just know it's just like for some reason they're just not on their game when they play in Dallas. I don't know what it is.
I was literally about to say, if it does end up being a split, I hope we do drop the 2 games in Dallas and it's only a 1-0 game, because you guys are not going to make me hate Pantera. But if I hear that goal song one more time, I swear.
Oh man, my computer is running slow. I think the second game was in Dallas, and if I'm not mistaken, it was on Super Bowl Sunday, and I think the Stars got shut out. I know the Avs won, because I remember I was like, and I know they got shut out without looking, because I was just like, this is like, I'm excited. I'm a big football fan. I was like, I'm excited for the Super Bowl, but the Stars play first. That's exciting. And then they just did like it was one of the worst games of the season, but it ended. I turned it off.
Texas flood that we had for our sound check. Yeah, I remember that game.
Yeah, I forgot about that. It was on Super Bowl. So yeah.
It made the Super Bowl more enjoyable. Games to know. I turned like game ended, final buzzer, turned it off, and drove to the Super Bowl party that I was meeting up with my friends, and was like, all right, I'm watching this from my memory until I have to talk about it on Monday's episode.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Good stuff. All right, so there is our first division. Well, maybe our second, because we did the one with the Jack over at the Blackhawks. Yeah. So what are we thinking? Like, I think he's right with the Stars. It could be that team that hovers. You just don't know. But I think it's okay to say, like, yeah, with a new coach, some fresh system, maybe they're a team that kind of sneaks in.
I made that poor guy doubt everything he knew about Dallas. I'm like, my goodness. Like, from what I've been seeing with Dallas, like they are mimicking Minnesota from a couple years ago. And if they could just navigate that, and like they have the contracts they need to work out, if they could just navigate that, yeah, they might be knocking on the door and upsetting somebody. They do it to the Avalanche every time they go to Dallas. So if they could just string that together and get it figured out, this could be a dangerous team. But what you see right now is just show me something.
Yeah. And I wasn't just being nice to him because we were doing a crossover. Like, I got all the respect in the world for Jake Ottinger. I think he's going to be a nightmare to go up against for the Avalanche for years to come. And I was dead serious when I said I hope he's gone after this contract is up, which I don't know if he can be. Let me bring that up. 23.
I still have nightmares about
No,
Dobby.
he won't be, because he'll be 26 when that contract is up. So darn it, he's going to be around for a long time. But it's what makes the games fun. Shouldn't be easy. Should not be easy. And he's not going to make it easy for that. Just like we're not going to make it easy for him. So, all right, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for today. Hope you guys enjoy the weekend. We'll be back next week. Who should we reach out to? Who do you want to do a crossover with next week? Seth? You want to get Seth in the Wild, or should we say that?
Let's talk to the Wild. Yeah, I've got some questions.
Okay, we'll reach out to Seth and see if we can hook up for a crossover with our wonderful friends over at the Minnesota Wild. But yeah, enjoy the weekend, guys. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day. It's obviously always appreciated. Until next week, he is Mr. Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan. I am Chris Maselli. This is the Locked On Avalanche podcast. See you guys later.